Hey y'all, it's Brandon with Voodoo Forge, and we are continuing with our Blacksmith armor little series here. We're about to harden the plates, which is a very crucial part. Before we get into this, I want to remind you, this is for entertainment purposes only. This is not a tutorial. Do not follow these instructions and try to make body armor that you wear into some kind of gunfight. Okay, if you need body armor, buy body armor. Alright, let's get to hardening. Now the heat treatment is the most essential part of this entire project. We know from our test pieces we want to replicate this heat treatment, which this was heated to non-magnetic and then quenched in oil. Now I use vegetable oil. You'll run into some old timers who will tell you, just use motor oil. Now if you're in a shop, you're already breathing in enough stuff that's bad for you. You don't need to add another carcinogenic that you can avoid. So I'm using vegetable oil. There are also commercially available quenches. But what I'm going to do to make sure each piece is the same is I'm going to heat them one at a time. I'm going to quench it. I'm going to check the temperature of the oil. I'm going to shut the forge off, let the oil cool back to, I just checked it, it's right around 80 degrees. Let the oil cool back down to 80 and then heat the next piece, because they've got to be consistent across the board. Now for those of you who don't understand the whole process that I'm talking about here, when you take, I'll layman's terms here, when you take steel to critical temperature, it's non-magnetic. Critical temperature is where you can change the internal structure of the steel. Okay, you can cool it down super slow and make the grain structure to where it is softer, or you can quench it and make the grain structure larger, which makes it harder. Now this heat treatment's really pretty simple because we're just hardening. If something is hardened and tempered, it's hardened and then some of that hardness is taken back out. So we seem to have gotten the trick with our sample piece here. Now a word about this steel that we're using from the tank. I cannot find an industrial standard on what kind of steel is used, but I can tell you that it's pretty tough stuff, and it should be consistent throughout the entire tank, because when they make these, they take a sheet of steel and they heat it, and then they have a ram that forces it through a hole, and that makes the bottom of the tank, and then it's spun down to get the top. So we know we've got the same consistency as we do in our test piece. But just to make sure everything goes as well as we can make it go, we're going to do this super slow. I'm going to be using pickup tongs. There. Oh, we got a little weather coming in, which has cooled things down, which is good, because it's going to be hot as can be in here in a minute, hotter than it already is. But these are pickup tongs, and that way I have to touch it, the steel, when I get it out of the forge, because when you grab it with the tongs, which I'm going to keep these tongs next to the forge to keep them warm so they suck out the least amount of heat as possible. On the 5 pieces that I have something mild steel attached to, that's probably what I'm going to try to grab, so I'm not taking any heat out of our plate, because this stuff right here won't matter if it's not if it doesn't get the same effect, because it's mild steel, so it's not hardenable anyway. But we're gonna fire it. I'm gonna show you, I did something a little different in the forge too. I put a couple of sacrificial pieces of steel in there, and I'll be able to judge the forge temperature by the color of that steel, and I'm gonna let the forge reach temperature before I put these in, and then I've got to keep my eye on it, and as soon as it is where I think it needs to be, pull it out, check it with a magnet, quench it in oil. It's going to be smoky, it's going to be hot, but we're going to jump on that. By the way, I'm also going to be wearing gloves, got on long pants and leather boots, because sometimes sometimes the oil boils and comes right out, and there'll be spatter and flames and all kinds of things. Also got a fire extinguisher. Well, I got several fire extinguishers on hand. So let's get this done. My 2 sacrificial pieces of steel I've got in here. I'll go ahead and light this bad boy. Come on, light. This is my quench tank I'm going to be using. I made this from a beverage CO2 tank. It holds about 2 gallons of oil. It's aluminum. You want to use a metal container that's not galvanized for something like this, because if you drop a part in your quench tank and you're using plastic, it can burn a hole in your tank before you can stop it, and then you've got even bigger problems. Going in with the first piece. We are at critical temperature, I believe. Time to pull it out and check it. Notice our magnet won't stick to the steel. In we go. Switch it around. What the moving it around does is it exposes it to as much of the oil as possible. Just below critical temperature. Degrees, so we're going to wait a while on the next one. It's been 10 minutes and it's already dropped 25 degrees. We're at about 99. That took 40 minutes to cool down. It's gonna be a long night. Sticks to the tongues, but not plate. Oh no! Oh no! No! Oh no! Our oil's already dropped about 5 degrees in just a couple of minutes, but it dropped to 100 degrees in like 5 minutes on the last one, and then that last 15 degrees took forever. So I got my little fan on it here. Turned it on high. That should take care of it. Get done last night, or I should say this morning. So I've got 2 more plates to harden, and then we'll be done with the hardening part of it. I prefer doing this at night when the light is lower, because it's easier to see the colors, and that's one of the ways it's easy to judge the temperature of the steel, when you can see the color well. But anyway, I got 2 more plates to harden. Gonna get done with that and then get them scrubbed up. Last plate. Yeah, I didn't wear my gloves on my last one. Give me a break. finally hardened. Now, this tacky, sticky oil residue needs to come off. The best way to do that is using dishwashing. So I'm gonna leave it soak for a little while. Now I'll come back and scrub each one of these off. My original plan for putting this thing together was to forge rivets. And as I've continued through this process, there's been some reasons why that won't work. The first thing I thought of is we're going to have mild steel. All the connections between the plates would be mild steel, which, you know, rounds will go right through. I had even contemplated cutting some more of these tanks off, forging it round, making rivets out of that material. But if you're using hardened steel like that, you'll have to heat it to actually forge the finish head on the rivet. So that would be taking all the temper out and totally wouldn't make any it would be pointless to use that material in that manner, because you'd be softening it, and I'd have to torch that part of the plate, so it'd be softening the plates too. So I've come to the conclusion that the best thing I can go with is grade 8 bolts. Now these are higher strength than your regular bolts. These are the easiest high strength bolts for me to get a hold of, and I'm just gonna go with these and tighten them down and put a I originally thought about using a Loctite on them, but now I think I'm just gonna hit it with a MIG welder on the back just to keep the nut on. The trouble with grade 8 bolts is they have this yellow zinc coating, which is great for corrosion resistance, but aesthetically it's not pleasing. So I'm going to remove this yellow zinc coating using the easiest thing to do that with. It's a new gallon vinegar. So I'm just taking my zinc coated bolts and I will soak them in vinegar overnight, and that'll remove all that coating, so it will look better on this. It's been in here in this vinegar about 24 hours, and all that yellow zinc is gone, and now it's got a nice black finish, which is iron oxide, which is a fancy way of saying rust. But rust, in its purest form, is actually black. Yeah. Put that in there. Let me get rid of this vinegar. Let's rinse these bad boys. Need a sink in the shop. Now these will almost flash rust. I mean, they'll just like actually get the rust colored rust on them in no time, because they have nothing to protect them. And I just dumped them in water. But maybe it won't be too bad. Get everything dry, let everything. Tell you what, for the last couple of weeks, it has been overbearingly hot. It's been in the 90s outside, which makes it, you know, 100 to 110, or sometimes hotter with the forge going in the shop. So this right now it's in the 70s, and it is nice. Well, y'all, we've got the plates hardened, we've got everything cleaned and ready to go, so we just need to put this thing together. So join us in the next video and we will put this thing together and we can see how this turns out. Y'all behave yourselves. We are at critical temperature, I believe. Time to pull it out and check it. Notice our magnet won't stick to the steel. In we go. Swish it around. What the moving it around does is it exposes it to as much of the oil as possible.